I am gonna recommend you books that are so gay. Hi besties, welcome. I hope you're doing well. It's June. It's Pride Month. It's the best month of the year. The corporations are shoving rainbows down our throats. And here we are, just vibing. It's time to celebrate all things queer. All things in the alphabet soup that is the LGBTQIA plus community. My favorite people in the world. I'm pretty loud about it. If you don't know, I'm queer. I don't super vibe with any label besides queer, but I'm somewhere in the bisexual realm. Labels are used by other people to put us in boxes so that they can understand us and control us when really they don't have any right to do that. So if you don't vibe with a label, you don't have to use it. I have a whole stack of books that center the queer community or are written by queer authors, and there's lots of different genres. Whatever queer shit you're looking for, I want you to find it today, right here. Before I get into my recommendations, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is Book of the Month. I love working with Book of the Month so much, and this month is no different. If you don't already know, Book of the Month is a super popular and constantly growing online service for readers. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors and find readers books that they are sure to love. The Book of the Month team works constantly to create a curated list of books that are sure to strike your fancy. Each month, their list spans lots of different genres and types of books, so you're almost guaranteed to find something that you're interested in. But if one month nothing really speaks to you, never fear, because Book of the Month is a risk-free shopping experience, and you can press skip anytime, no questions asked, and you will not be charged for that month. Plus, there's some really exciting news in the Book of the Month cinematic universe, and that is that Book of the Month has recently released a podcast. It's a virtual book tour podcast where members of their editorial team interview different authors whose books have been included in the Book of the Month box, and you get to know a little bit more about that author and their work. It's already charted really high on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so wherever you listen to your podcasts, check it out. It's called Virtual Book Tour, and it's filmed in front of a live studio audience of Book of the Month employees. You can listen to it for free wherever you get your podcast. It's sure to be a super fun time, and I think you should check it out. Now let's talk about this month's options. First up, we have The Stardust Thief, a debut fantasy epic by Chelsea Abdullah. Next, we have a murder thriller called Things We Do in the Dark by Jennifer Hillier. Then we have Woman of Light by Callie Fayardo-Anstine, which follows 5 generations of an indigenous Chicano family in the American West in the 1930s. Then we have a domestic thriller called The Lies I Tell by Julie Clark, which follows a con artist and the woman who is doing everything in her power to expose her. And lastly, we have my pick for the month, which is The Lifestyle by Taylor Hahn. This book follows our main character, Georgina. After walking in on her husband cheating on her, she employs a master plan to save her marriage, which includes going to swingers parties in New York with their best friends. It sounds like hijinks are going to ensue. It just sounds like such a romp and a fun exploration of love and friendship in New York City. I'm super stoked to get to this one. If any of these books sound like something that would interest you, you can get your first new release hardback for only $9.99 using the code SUMMER today. Check them out. Do it. I am going to start with YA because I think it is a good place to start in your queer journey. If you're reading queer stories for the first time, a lot of times YA does a good job of portraying the self-discovery element of queerness. And I think queer stories are important for everyone, but I especially think queer stories are important for young adults because these are people that are sort of going through that self-discovery process for the first time. There will be representation for them to see themselves and know that there are other options out there than the ones that society has been ramming down our throats forever and ever. Off the bat, I'm just gonna go ahead and recommend one of my very favorite books of all time ever, and that is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. This book changed my life, and I have read it so many times, and I will keep rereading it until the day that I die. This book follows 2 twins, Jude and Noah, in 2 different timelines. Jude's chapters follow the twins when they are 16 and somewhat estranged and having to find their way back to each other. And Noah's chapters follow the twins when they are 13, so 3 years earlier, sort of before this rift happened between them. So throughout the book, you're sort of puzzle piecing together what has happened in their family, and it is just such a beautiful story. It's about grief, it's about trauma, it's about love, but most of all, it's about like family and art. One of our main characters, Noah, is queer. He knows that he's queer from the start of the book, and he does deal with some bullying because of it, but it also follows his first sort of relationship and the first boy that he feels really in love with. The whole book is amazing. If you want to read this with me, this is our book club pick for the Scrollmates book club for June. So if you want to read this along with me and an amazing community of Discord people, and then have a little Zoom get together and talk about it at the end of the month, you can sign up at my Patreon at the link down below. Join us for June and read I'll Give You the Sun. I promise you're gonna love it. One of the things I love so much about this book is that the prose is really, really lyrical. All of these like sticky tabs are just lines that I thought were beautiful and really, really loved. So if I just go to a random one, it says, "This is what I want. I want to grab my brother's hand and run back through time, losing years like coats falling from our shoulders." So good. Next, in terms of YA, I want to briefly touch on Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sands. There's actually a sequel to this out now, I think. So I need to reread this and read the sequel. And I actually haven't read this since high school. One thing about me and my queer experience is that I did not know I was queer until like a year and a half ago. And I came out in September of 2020. So a lot of these books I read as a straight person. I know that's not how it works, but like I read them not knowing I was queer. But because of that, I think so many of them moved me because they were speaking to a part of me that I didn't even know existed yet. And I remember that really being the case with Aristotle and Dante because it's just such a beautiful love story between these two boys who live in Texas, and they're kind of polar opposites. Dante is like super confident and self-assured, whereas Ari really has a hard time speaking to other people, and he's just constantly kind of doubting himself and really lacking confidence. It's just about these young teen boys who are sort of discovering what love means for the first time. There's like a lot of familial trauma, and there is some trauma regarding being queer in this book, so take care while reading, but it's really, really lovely. It's also very prosaic, very beautiful. It's just really, really wonderful. We've been talking about some books that are heavy, and oftentimes the queer characters in those books are not having a good time. I also want to shout out some books that have just queer joy and happiness, and there's far less trauma that stems from being queer, because being queer is so fucking dope, and sometimes we need to read books that tell those stories as well. First up, we have She Drives Me Crazy by Kelly Quinlan. This book was really cute. This is a YA sapphic romance about two girls at school that do not get along. They do not like each other. They are from very different sections of the school. One is sort of a basketball jock and openly gay, and the other is on the cheerleading team and does student government and is not openly queer. She's starting to have feelings for this girl and she doesn't know what to do about it. It's super witty, super funny. I loved the side characters in this one, and overall I just thought it was a really fun time. It's just super quick and super fun and has a really great little sapphic love story. It's like Grease but with two women. And it's set in modern day. And there's no singing. And also Danny wasn't an athlete. It's not like Grease at all. Another really cute sapphic YA romance is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This book follows our main character Liz Leidy, who has this master plan to go to this elite college, and she has her whole career planned out. But when her financial aid falls through, really her only option is to compete in this prom pageant at her school to get the scholarship that the winner gets. And in doing this, she meets Mac, who is a band kid and a skater girl. She's not like other girls. They become fast friends. I loved these characters so much, and it's just really cute. Everyone's well fleshed out. It's just a book that'll make your cheeks warm because Mac and Liz are so cute. Next up, I have Dress Codes for Small Towns by Courtney C. Stevens. I love this book so much. We follow a main character who's questioning, which I really appreciate because as a person who was questioning in secret for a long time, I appreciate a lot of what Billy experiences as she sort of explores what her sexuality is and how that's tied to gender identity, and how you feel is not tied to how other people perceive you. And it's just so brilliant. This group of friends, so elite. I think what do they call themselves? I think they call themselves the Hexagon. They have the cutest friendship group, and it explores what it's like to grow up in a small town, and specifically a small religious town, and be questioning your sexuality and what all that means. But it's really funny and sweet. In the opening scene, they accidentally set a church on fire, which is just pretty iconic if you ask me. One of the things I love so much about Dress Codes for Small Towns is that it's a book that exists in gray area and acknowledges that queerness and love is is such a spectrum and you're not going to land on one side or the other most times, that you're somewhere in the middle, and that it might not make sense to you at first, and that you really have to take your own time to figure out what it means to you, or you can just accept that you'll never know. But I really appreciate that acknowledgement of those gray areas. Queerness is not defined by super harsh lines or boundaries or boxes, and you can fit into as many or as few of those boxes as seem right to you. I think that's a message that young people everywhere really resonate with and love to read about, especially through Billy's eyes, because she's an amazing main character. Next, it's Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I was cracking up when I read this book, and I cared so deeply about the romance and the relationship between these two main characters. Oh, I love them so much. If you don't already know, Red, White, and Royal Blue follows the son of the President of the United States in an alternate realm where a woman is President of the United States, and it follows her son as he begins a torrid affair with the Prince of England, and they have to keep that a secret because of course they do. And so they're always going to these like diplomatic functions and sneaking away, and they're so cute and they love each other so much, and it's just so good. There are really great like consensual and enthusiastic sex scenes in it. With straight people, you can be as graphic as you want and it's appropriate, but as soon as a queer person has sex, it's inappropriate. Well, Casey McQuiston said, I don't think so, not on my watch. It's just as important to have sex represented as it is to have love represented, and it's just such a good book. It's so fun. And speaking of young adult, I have to shout out Alice Oseman, who I refer to as the queen of the alphabet soup. She keeps feeding us. She will not rest until she covers every color of the rainbow. I want to talk about Heartstopper, because Heartstopper is a series of graphic novels, but it's also a webcomic. I'll link it down below so you can start reading it right now if you want to. And it follows Charlie, who is openly gay at school and grappling with the fact that sometimes people suck about that, and Nick Nelson, who is on the rugby team and straight, until Nick realizes he's starting to have feelings for Charlie. And so it tracks their friendship and then relationship, and all of their friends around them are just like the best support system and the cutest found family in the world. And the Netflix show came out last month, and I've already watched it so many times. It's so good. It's like, it's my queer hug is what I like to call it, because it's just so rooted in like love and joy and everybody being supportive of each other and loving each other, besides Ben Hope. I will get my pitchfork and my torches and I will find Ben Hope. The graphic novels are just as good as the show, and the show is just as good as the graphic novels. I highly recommend it. You just can't go wrong with Alice Oseman, because anything they write is probably queer and probably great. Find an Alice Oseman book and read it. Your life will be better. You're welcome. Let's talk adult fiction. First up, let me recommend another one of my favorite books of all time. Is there a theme in my favorite books of all time? And it is that they are queer. Yes. Why? Why do you think? Do some self-reflection. Come back to me later. Another one of my favorite books of all time, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Oh man, this book, whew, life-changing, life-altering, life-shattering. It is a Greek myth retelling, I suppose, of Achilles and Patroclus. Every time I say it differently, because every time I say it on the internet, people tell me I'm saying it wrong. There's only so many ways you can pronounce it. I don't care if I'm saying it wrong. If people keep roasting me for saying it wrong, I'm gonna just call him Patrick, because I have said it every way you can possibly say it, and every time somebody says I'm wrong. How is that possible? How is that possible? Anyway, it follows Achilles and Patroclus from the time they are young teens who discover some feelings for each other, and into adulthood as Achilles becomes this famous warrior and Patroclus becomes his best friend, historically speaking. But in fact, they were gay as fuck. And this book explores just this beautiful, poetic, all-consuming, amazing, show-stopping, never done before, boost the house down Charlie relationship, and it's amazing. I stayed up till like 4 a.m. to finish it, and I was just absolutely weeping. It's so beautiful. It really brought me back to my Percy Jackson era. All of the bitches I know who were Percy Jackson stans in middle school and high school are queer now. I don't know what Rick Riordan was lacing those books with, but we all turned gay. Thank you, Uncle Rick. I want them to make a movie of The Song of Achilles so badly. It's unreal. Give it to me now. The next adult fiction book I have is actually a classic novel. And it's actually not expressly queer, but we'll talk about it. And that is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. You literally cannot convince me that Jo March is not a queer lady. And Louisa May Alcott was pretty openly queer. She didn't really have the terms or definitions to define herself, but she said in interviews around the time that she often wishes she was born into a man's body and that she wasn't interested in men in that way. So she's pretty obviously queer. Nobody will ever be able to convince me that she wasn't unless she rises from the dead and tells me so herself. I triple dog dare you, Louisa. This book I like to bring up when I'm talking about queer books because it's not expressly queer. And as a person who was not expressly queer for a long time, I see myself so much in Jo March. I've heard a lot of people say that they think Jo March is probably a lesbian. I tend to think that Jo March is probably asexual, but I don't think Jo March really knows what she is. And I really appreciate that in the reading experience because for many, many years, I also didn't know what was going on in my head and my heart. Louisa May Alcott used Jo and Laurie to play with gender expression because Jo is the woman in the friendship and Laurie is the man in the friendship, and even their names are sort of gender swapped. But in addition to that, she sort of swaps their roles in many ways. She really was writing about characters who were defying gender roles without really knowing it, and that to me is so interesting. And it's also, you know, proof that queer people have been around forever. I feel like some people like to think that queer people are a new phenomenon when in fact that's not true. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I love it so much, and I think it's super fucking queer, even if the word queer is only ever used to mean strange in this novel. One more in terms of fiction, and it's horror, and that is They Never Learned by Lane Fargo. This is one of my favorite horror books I've ever read. I think about it all the time. Basically, it follows a professor at an elite New England university, so we have some dark academia vibes in there as well. She has taken it upon herself to find and kill all of the men on campus who have sexually assaulted women on campus. She's a girl boss for that. While her storyline is happening, we also have a storyline with a student who is new to school, sort of trying to uncover her sexuality and dealing with the repercussions of trusting men, which there are so many. And so you're dealing with like these two queer women. Plot twists are so good. The kill men energy is so strong. It's a blast and a half. It's really gory. There's a lot of body horror. It's so fun. I really appreciated it because it was a really cool and safe outlet for my female rage. Like I could sort of channel all of my female rage into this book and through this character, and I felt very cathartic. Let's move on to nonfiction. First and foremost, when it comes to queer nonfiction, my go-to is Audre Lorde. This is Sister Outsider, and also, oh my god, like, are you kidding me? I'm sorry, are you kidding me? That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Audre Lorde was a Black lesbian poet, activist, writer. She is one of just the figures in history that I admire the most. And this is a really incredible collection of her essays. She also wrote a lot of queer poetry that was very explicitly gay, that is also awesome. But I personally really love her essays. Audre Lorde in this collection and in her other essays talks about what liberation looks like for Black people and Black women and Black queer women, and talks about the intersectionalities of all of those identities and how intersectionality is super important to talk about, especially when we're talking about feminism, because there's a tendency to prioritize white women and straight women. It is so brilliant. She is so brilliant. This will change the way you look at things. It will change the way you think. It will change what you prioritize. It's so great. And Audre Lorde is just the top of the tops. Next, in terms of nonfiction, I have In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a memoir about Machado's own time in an abusive lesbian relationship, and it's told through horror tropes and these little vignettes that explore different tropes in horror and folk literature. One thing I really appreciate about In the Dream House is that it dives into how detrimental it can be to queer women to not talk about queer abuse, and it sort of counteracts this myth that we have of the lesbian paradise, and that without men we have no aggression, and so any lesbian relationship is like paradise and peaceful and wonderful. And this book talks about why those messages are so harmful, because then when lesbians enter into toxic and abusive relationships, a lot of times it's harder for them to know what's happening to them because they've been told that it's impossible to happen within a queer relationship. So it dives into all of that. It has so much sort of commentary on how society perceives lesbians, but also how lesbians perceive lesbians. I recommend it so much. There's one section in this book called Dream House as Choose Your Own Adventure, and I've never had a book do what that section did to my brain while I was reading it. I thought it was so genius. I think this book is just like technically such a feat. There is so much about it that is so technical, and it's just really effectively and like intricately told. So those are some of my Pride Month queer recommendations. Spice up your shelves, read from more queer authors, and drop all of your queer recommendations down below because you can never have too many queer books on your bookshelf. Am I right? I am. I'm right. I hope all of you that are watching this that are part of the queer community are feeling safe and happy and proud this Pride Month, even if your pride has to be a little quieter than other people's. I am proud of you. I love you, and I'm so happy that you're here. Don't forget to check out Book of the Month at the link down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the Patreon down below if you want to read I'll Give You the Sun with us this month. As always, all of my social media will be linked down below. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and in case you haven't heard it today, I love you. Bye.